With the adventure in Netopia concluded, it's time to head back home Wow, I didn't know Harvey Dent was in fashion. Ah well, have some shipping fuel of Land dreaming of reuniting with Mail before he's woken up on the plane. After sorting out a small emergency concerning a poisonous spider, somehow having gotten on board, the plane's landing mechanisms malfunction. Due to the spider attack, the official net battler assigned to the plane is unconscious, so it's up to Land to prevent the plane from crashing due to yet another terrorist attack.
Yeah, again, this game was made in 2001, developed for 9/11, and not released in the West until 2002. This level had to be awkward when importing the game.
The plane computer is something of a pain to navigate due to the Navi response for this attack having thrown up a series of magnetic fields we need to disable to even traverse a region correctly, meaning there's a lot of backtracking that takes place. Not made any better in how I can't use Aqua Custom style here due to most of the viruses being Elect type. So for me, this region is always a nuisance. We find the Navi responsible, Magnet Man, who is here for the airplane's high power program for use in construction of the Super Navi. A copy of it already transmitted thanks to his operator, Gauss Magnets.
Wait, this dude is like super rich within the series canon. Couldn't he have just, I don't know, bought a copy of the program himself instead of needing to steal it?
I'm not kidding. This guy has money from him being a made it big from rag to riches corporate CEO. In fact, there's this whole big exposition drop about why he hates humanity is because his parents died from an illness and society around him did nothing to help them, even though they were more than capable of doing so.
Something I expect to be a common backstory to real living people in the next few years due to a certain idiot-in-chief.
Especially damning since his brother was taken in by a wealthy family that could have helped them, only for said brother to become a count.
Count Jack Zapp, in fact. You know, Electman's operator from the first game. They actually follow up on this in the anime a few times. Apparently, Jack and Gauss can't stand each other. They both adore Gauss's daughter Tesla.
But while this explains his association with gospel and that they all appear to be made up of people that have been scorned by the world that are in turn lashing out, it's kind of stupid for Gauss to be doing this as, 1, he's doing this to a flight he is actually on, and his actions will cause the plane to crash, and thus take him down with it. 2, his boss is actually also on the plane, and crashing the plane means their grand scheme will end right here and now. And 3, again, he could have just purchased this program, or even an entire plane itself to get to it, with no one being the wiser, as it's not a prototype. It's standard issue!
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
Gah, this game and its story contrivances.
Magnet Man himself is only a pain in how most of his attacks home in on you with magnetism! So playing evasively doesn't quite work unless you have invincible chips on hand. Coupled with him being the first boss whose HP breaks 1,000, and you might be in for a rough time. But with Gauss being literally stuck in a plane with nowhere to go, beating his Navi wasn't exactly a prerequisite for getting him arrested. But with that done, Gospel's running out of members, thus they start to get desperate with regards to the completion of their plans, with Freez Man affecting the world's environmental systems.
The hell? They have weather machines in this not-too-distant future? I mean, yeah, mainline canon has them, but most of them were controlled and developed by robots and robotic engineering. They don't exactly have the same kind of physical manufacturing or technological level in this setting due to, you know, the emphasis on virtual technology and programming. At least in the games, it pops up infrequently in the anime.
Yeah, this is a thing brought up in Battle Network 4 as well, and it's stupid there too. At least in Battle Network 6, where they also use this, it's part of a super tech metropolis, where that's more of an experimental system that's more based on mainline canon.
And I gotta say, if you're trying to spitefully destroy the world, why are you spending all this time trying to build a super Navi if you can devastate society through weather control? Hell, part of this system controls earthquakes!
Actually, they didn't even bother to take control of the system at all. Just jam it up by jamming up the internet with digital ice. It's like normal ice, but made of bits and bobbles and viruses. So now, Lan has to figure out how to melt the digital ice to restore the environmental program. But that's not made easy because that ice blocks up literally every route on the internet, meaning we need to traverse every internet map multiple times with varying levels of an antivirus. And this takes forever to do as a result. It's too bad we don't know anyone or thing that specializes in setting things on fire.
Hey, wait! We actually do know a guy who does that. Where is Mr. Match?
Well, around this time, you can find him at the airport with his second net navvy, Heat Man. And while you can battle him for an HP memory, he actually plays no part in the resolution of this conflict.
Really? Really? It's like, he's right there! His navvy is specifically made for combating this cataclysm!
And once again, to remind people I came into this franchise through the anime, Match had arguably one of the best arcs of the early part of the series, directly because of their adaptation of these events. Anime and tokusatsu writer Kenichi Araki,
who you may know from past things I reviewed as someone who worked as a writer on Kamen Rider Black, Jetman, and Zyuranger, but more recently contributed to Ultra Galaxy Mega Monster Battle and Ultraman Ginga. He wrote pretty much everything for the Battle Network anime. My interests always seem to exist in this weird 6 degrees of separation.
Anyways, he made this event exceedingly dramatic by tying Fireman's death and Heatman's creation directly into Gospel's plan to freeze the net and this environmental system solid, making Match take a step towards being an anti-hero in a quest for revenge. Without even seeing the anime for years, I clearly remember Match's expressions of helplessness, as all he could do was look on at the decomposing remnants of his best friend. The surprise at Mr. Famous being able to reconstitute him with more power by integrating him into another prototype Navi. The joy he expressed at finally getting payback on the Gospel Navi responsible, the aforementioned Freez Man, and the exuberance at getting Fireman back during the events of Access after Heatman was similarly damaged by a Darkloid. And the games have none of that. We have a madman tempting us with ice puns,
Killed to perfection.
and he's just schlepping around in an airport doing nothing.
To be fair, the anime started after this game had been made, to, ironically enough, begin to influence the stories of the game, since their whole N1 Grand Prix mess came up before the third game used it, to not even get how much better they used the whole Dark Chip storyline. But when reviewing this in hindsight, you kinda see how the anime took more advantage of the existing characters and material to sell some pretty interesting tales for its story medium and demographic.
So yeah, no help from Match, damn it. So it's off to hunt through the web for a guy named Doc. That's good at this type of antivirus. Our search for a cure eventually takes us past the Netopia section of the network into the Undernet. And unlike last game, the Undernet actually looks menacing and like it's the dark side of the web, occupied by heel navies. They are a discussion for another day. But by reaching Doc and getting some more back and forth, we eventually get most of the antiviral upgrades needed to access and restore a majority of the network, and track down a heel navi which reveals Freez Man's hideout is in Kukia Square. Alright, that section that's blocked off. Totally forgot about that. Inside is, of course, Freez Man, and this is another enemy that's specialized in a mix of defense and area control, and I just steamrolled him with the Gator strategy. Gator is broken. But with him deleted, all of the ice vanishes, and he won't cause an earthquake of magnitude 10.0.
Good, because that movie was terrible. Wait, no, that was 10.5.
Fortunately, things quiet down for about a week, only for a recovered Protoman to begin encountering massive amounts of cloned copies of the Gospel Navis wreaking havoc. With their forces still decimated and Protoman occupied, Yuichiro has no choice but to rely on his son to get to the bottom of this newest snarl in the Gospel incident. Thus, we go to reinvestigate Kukia Square, only to find a portal at the end is spitting out the copies. He reports this to Yuichiro, who in turn reveals that they've managed to pick up electromagnetic signals coming from Kotobukiya.
But for them to even pick them up, the amount of EM radiation they need to be putting out would have to literally be insane!
And yeah, Yuichiro confirms that this amount of energy would be lethal to humans. But fortunately, we've got gear which can help Lan get there unharmed. Though to mirror Yuichiro's hesitance from the end of the last game, he doesn't want to ask it of him. Hoped Lan wouldn't be the first responder to checking out Kukia Square, and someone else would have stepped in for them. But Lan's words managed to convince him, and he takes pride in the responsible person he's managed to raise his son as.
Even though he's close to being an absentee parent due to his work, and Lan himself is something of a slacker. But whatever, the scene really works well.
Thus, Lan and Megaman arrive in Kutabukia, and dear God, Dr. Regal opened up a dimensional area!
I mean, seriously, what is up with that building? It looks like it's half digitized. The anime used this kind of imagery for dimension spaces and beyond art. This is something I expect to see in Digimon, Dot Hack, Go Busters, and Confrontation.
Worse, Yuichiro's remote radiation readings were way off. 30,000 times the normal levels of background radiation is what we're encountering.
Background radiation is normally about 1 millisievert, or 1/1000th of a sievert. Sievert being the unit of measurement of radiation exposure. And the fatal exposure range happens at around 4 to 5 sieverts. This is enough radiation to kill someone 7 times over!
How are you even still fucking alive? No, for that matter, why would Lan's friends just barge in and follow him up to the building? Granted, they've also got the Magware EM shields protecting them from the radiation, but come on, guys! There's a time and a place for the moral support backup!
Actually, come to think of it, for all this radiation being put out, that means there's a lot of energy being transferred. And often that means everything is pretty hot. Computers do not do hot very well without breaking, so how are they all functioning in this heavily irradiated environment? Especially since they are what's supposedly giving off that radiation.
The apartment complex is all locked up due to data warping, which requires Megaman head in, travel through the warps, and collect the data. It's easy to get lost here as all the teleport panel locations are screwed up, then you fix them, and then they take you somewhere else entirely. But each of them are guarded by the Navi copies of the Gospel bosses, so it's rematch time for the lot of them, which is another thing this game innovated on, which would then be followed up with in later entries.
Granted, you already had the whole rematch thing be viable due to the ghost day of the Navis haunting the internet, which you need to fight for these stronger chip varieties, but feels nicer to do these in narrative.
And all the while, the true mastermind gloats that his plans are all coming to fruition. Soon, he will have the true Super Navi, the ultimate AI, Base.exe!
Hold it! You're trying to clone Base. Base! Oh, he cannot be happy about that. Yeah, not happy at all.
This segues into our post-game completion mission for the game. Deep in the greater depths of the Undernet, you can find the World 3 server areas, all of which are locked up and require you obtain the S, SS, and SSS licenses I mentioned earlier, mainly because these areas are ridiculously hard. Complete these, and you will get past the barriers which present you the World 3 Remnant secret bosses. Pharaoh Man, in his third reappearance, technically second since network transmission came later. Napalm Man, but only once you've gotten all of the other V3 Navi chips. And lastly, Planet Man, once you've gotten at bare minimum 200 different chips. And what's the point of this area? To test potential initiates into the New World Order. The Order of World 3!
If this was the test to get into the organization, hate to break it to you, but we kicked their asses even before the style change upgrade.
Yeah, Planet Man's delusional acting as if he can take over the world while residing solely in the network.
Which would admittedly work if this was the anime, but not here. And certainly not with you.
With him down and World 3 defeated, again, it's a long walk back to the entrance, where we encounter someone else familiar. The true base.exe.
We'll actually get into base.exe's backstory in the Battle Network 3 reviews. It's actually really heartbreaking in a way with how he devolved into a battle freak seeking power in order to survive, until that's all he became. But regardless, Gospel never had the original. We're trying to recreate him. Base has been here, as that's where all this powerful data has collected.
I bring this up as while among fans this is common knowledge, to casual viewers of the Battle Network series, they sometimes think Gospel was responsible for creating Base, when that's not the case. Even the game says what they made was just another flawed copy, and again have that showcased after the end credits and the actual fight with the real Base. So I don't know how this misconception even got started. Regardless, Base is a true challenge to your skill, with his ever-present life orb preventing any chip that does under 100 damage from hitting him. And then with him holding all that health, it can be difficult to deal with him, though an appropriate one since he's the super uber boss. And hell, even if he's not going full power on us, he finds himself amused at the battle and chooses to leave, deciding we're a worthy opponent he wants to let get stronger so he can truly go all out.
Again, Battle Network 3. We'll get there.
Though with regards to this game, after you beat him, you need to do it again, with his V2 and V3 ghost data, to not only collect all of his Navi chips, but S-rank those encounters as well, which, even using a Gatorfuller like I am, can take a few tries.
Why do you need an S-rank against him, and by proxy every other V3 Navi in the game?
By doing so, you cause Megaman to subconsciously run his hub batch program to keep up with the speed of input and challenge presented. This harmony between this aspect of his true digital self resonating with the change batch to max out all of Megaman's capabilities and unlock Megaman's final style change, in this game at least, and arguably his fourth most powerful form, Saito Style.
And again, Saito Style just sounds better than Hub Style does to me.
And Saito Style gives Mega Man the traits of all his other styles, only taken up to 11, at the cost of halving his health. Hub Style, yes, alright, I'll finally start using the actual name of the style in the English version, should only really be used once you've gotten your HP maxed. But if your preferred playstyle is chaining massive numbers of program advances, it's often contested on whether it or a custom style is better to use in this game, since that higher HP advantage is pretty easily negated by having the elemental weakness.
Though before we get back to the final boss, I gotta mention it. Gospel duping. Due to how the game saves your data after you fight the final game boss, you appear back in the game right before you fought it, but with anything you acquired after that last save. Meaning if you save right before you acquire something, acquire it, use sneak runs to rush to fake fast and fight him, when you reload the game back up after the credits roll, you'll have that item right in front of you again, so you can get another copy of it, on top of the one you already got.
This does not work on any of the Mega Man power-ups, or bafflingly bug frags, but all of the battle chips can be cloned this way, meaning every chip that only appears once in the game, well, if you avoid getting it until you can fight Gospel, you can generate clones of it and break that limitation.
Roll V3, Recovery 300, any you only get one asterisk chip. You can get as many as you need from doing this, and makes things no different than had you Game Shark the library to begin with. You see why I don't exactly stigmatize cheating the chip collection in the Battle Network, since the game makers leave in several intentional means of game breaking?
Regardless, we destroy the program generating most of the radiation guarding him, and get to Gospel's boss in their main server room. The boss claiming to know and control everything. And hey, he's not really to blame. All he does is give out the orders.
Not how successional hierarchies work, dude, as they wouldn't have committed those specific crimes had you not ordered or encouraged them to do them. Hell, that's also a lie, as you directly blew up at least 2 of your subordinates, murdering them in the process!
Yeah, this is another Sakaki-type twisted persona that doesn't think a damn thing he did was wrong. Hell, he thinks he had the right to do it all. And as the others arrive as backup, the boss reveals that it's too late. He's already completed his base clone project, which he sticks on Megaman.
Get it? Because his Japanese name is Forte? My god, this pun does not work at all with the localized name. This is exactly why you do not localize names!
Though compared to the true base, this one is a complete pushover as he lacks life aura and the insane hit points. All of this effort to create a copy of base, and it's not even the equivalent of a cheap knockoff. How embarrassing is that? But with copy base beaten, the holographic disguise is gone, revealing the true mastermind. This kid. This fucking kid named Sean, who you actually saw a few times previously in the game just standing there and watching in the background. Most significantly on the plane that Goss almost crashed, as I said earlier. Everyone's surprised that his true identity makes him think they're insulting him, and spitefully turns his server system to full power, trying to use it to create the true base this time, using all the copy data bugs his servers have generated, which ramps the radiation in the area higher than their suits can protect them from. Lan orders everyone out, in which we get a moment of shipping, before Sean's impulsive, angry response to a true statement causes his fake bass to evolve into the gospel bug, or gospel virus, beast.
Which is of course based on Base's robot wolf Treble, originally named Gospel from the original series.
Yeah, turns out Sean's entire Navi cloning plan: create too many copies or force too much of this bug data, essentially junk data from the network that they were using as the basis for these entities, to amalgamate, you just get one massive virus.
Bugs, in the form of the item Bug Frag, were actually another collectible in the game I didn't mention before because I didn't really use them. There's a trader in Kukia Square that gives you chips needed for full completion, but they're not exactly essential, and there's only 32 of them here. However, in part because of this incident, later Battle Network games would end up featuring them prominently as an alternative, rare form of currency. Story-wise, I always assumed them to be pieces of gospel scattered across the network due to its defeat here, especially because of Battle Network 3's post-game storyline involving it.
Still, with Gospel created, it assumes control of Sean's systems, overloading everything and leaving both him and Lan on death's door. However, due to the bond of brothers Lan and Hub share due to the Hub batch, the pair enter a state of full synchro long enough for them to battle and defeat Gospel. The only issue with fighting him is, like Nightman and Quickman, his default state is guarding from damage, so you need to wait until that guard drops to unleash attacks on him. But otherwise, he's far less of a challenge than Base was, even with him generating copies of prior Gospel Navis. With Gospel scattered across the network, the server shut down, Lan somehow having not suffered from lethal radiation exposure, and while they wait for Sean to recover so he can be arrested, they find his diary. That tells them his oh-so-sad backstory of his parents dying, his relatives being assholes, and the only people that seemed to care about him he found online, and so he gathered them together to get revenge on the world. And thus, Lan forgives him, and offers to be his first friend, letting him off scot-free for all that he has done.
No! Not only no, but fuck no! Look, there's a difference between having sympathy towards someone that does bad things because there was tragedy in their life, and ignoring that they did those horrible things entirely. This was my whole thing with Ovan back in GU, as they recognized, and Ovan himself acknowledged he did horrible things. Ones he was willing to pay the price for. But they were done for a reason shown that wasn't entirely his fault, and much of his malevolence was simply done so the situation which would resolve the crisis everyone had found themselves in would end. And even then, there was a struggle for the protagonists to forgive him for that, with someone that regretted every action they took. That does not come into play here.
For fuck's sake, the first chapter of the game closed with Sean murdering one of his subordinates for failing him once, when he was still useful to him. And as you just said a few text screens ago, His gospel subordinates were his friends. People scorned or abused by the world just as he felt he was, and he would just callously throw them away if they screwed up or were of no use to him. If he really thought of them as his friends, he wouldn't do that.
No, he treats people as disposable pawns and doesn't care who or what he harms as part of his agenda, and he has less reason to do so than Wily did. A man who suffered a lifetime of scorn and dismissal towards his genius and actual efforts before he finally cracked, as opposed to most of the antagonists in this game, who simply could not let go of either petty things or things in their past despite being in better straits.
Hell, of them, Dark Miyabi, who was simply hired to do a job, and Princess Pride, who was ultimately trying to help her people with her involvement in the organization, are the only ones to avoid this interpretation of them after you realize how spitefully petty their motivations are, since all of them could have moved past this without having harmed anyone.
So, at this age, to be such a callous, sociopathic monster? You do not come back from that. For fuck's sake, this is the Uchiha fallacy all over again. Sean murdered multiple people, and you're just ignoring that because he's a kid. Hardship in your life is not a justification for you to take it out on others not responsible for that.
Oh, I don't care if it's mean. Everybody's got dead people. It's no excuse to get everybody else dead along the way.
But wait, Des! This is a game for kids!
It doesn't matter who the intended audience is if it lets off entirely someone who committed horrific acts as being non-culpable for them, even though we have been presented evidence to the contrary.
This conclusion ended up being so negatively received that they would later retcon in Battle Network 3 that Sean had actually been manipulated by Dr. Wily into pulling this whole gospel gambit off alongside his other members. Words to that effect then added in at the end of the game, but not exactly in definite terms. But regardless, are in ways that in no way remove the guilt from Sean's shoulders. Regardless of Wily's manipulation setting things into motion, he is still ultimately culpable for his own actions, and that includes murder. The anime likewise completely excised his character from their canon, with the gospel leader form being a robot puppet that would eventually be taken by Base to move around unnoticed in the real world. Fortunately, this ending is salvaged somewhat by Sean still going to jail for his crimes, and the gospel incident being swiftly put behind everyone. And with that downtime finally come, Lan and company can enjoy the last days of their summer vacation before they return to classes, with both realizing that despite having gotten ideas about what to do all of their assignments on, they forgot to actually finish their homework. Personally, I think saving the world from a terrorist mafia would have given them some leeway on that.
And that was Battle Network 2, and while it does drop the ball at the end, it overall is a decent time.
I can't stress enough how all of the gameplay innovations made from this entry would end up giving the series its ultimate longevity, alongside continuing the ongoing story progression for many of the characters and their relationships. Unfortunately, however, something that annoyed me about this game's overall story is how contrived most of its events feel, with Lan thwarting Gospel's plans solely by happenstance. While this is a common element in the series, the other games more justify the other incidents Lan and Megaman get involved in. Here, Dave's terrorist attack was only thwarted because they were in proximity. Had they gone camping a day earlier, Dave would have destroyed that dam. Had Lan not found that balloon, he'd never have gone to Yumland's network to become involved in stopping Shadow Man or gaining style change. Had he not been involved there, he wouldn't have been around to stop Princess Pride, who just so happened to be a gospel agent. And had he taken a differing flight, he wouldn't have been on the plane to stop Gauss. Of the entire series, this game is the one where its narrative seems the most artificially constructed to lead Lan through all of the related events.
Coupled with a few other questionable narrative choices, like, again, Gauss and that freaking plane, it's why, for me personally, Battle Network 5 takes the third best slot, demoting this one to 4th place of 6, not because the story overall was bad or the gameplay was bad, but it more feels like it suffered in its presentation of those events and the rationales for them. Though, ironically, Battle Network 5 would feature the return of several Gospel's former agents for its story.
And to mention the anime one last time, its story was pretty well adapted into that media form in the late end of the first anime series, even though it was amalgamated somewhat with the events of Battle Network 3. If you can find it subtitled or even the old DVDs Viz once released, it's not a bad arc even though it is pretty short.
We'll be getting back to the Battle Network series soon enough though, with the final entry in the original trilogy, my favorite entry story-wise, and what many consider to be the best game of this entire Battle Network timeline. See you then!